Okay, this happened back in 2016. I was 21 at the time and had just finished my second year of college. Things had been rough, too many all-nighters, too much coffee, and way too many people. I needed a reset, so I booked a solo trip to a small coastal town in Oregon called Havenbrook. You probably haven't heard of it. That's kind of the point. A quiet place, lots of fog, some old buildings, and a slow pace that made it feel like time forgot about it. I stayed at a place called the Windmere Inn. Nothing fancy, just one of those small 3-story hotels tucked near the edge of the water. It had these creaky wood floors and floral bedspreads that felt like they hadn't been changed since the 90s. I booked 4 nights, hoping to spend my days walking the shoreline, sketching, and just unplugging. I checked in on a Tuesday afternoon. It was cloudy, that kind of heavy gray that makes the ocean look silver instead of blue. There was only one person working the front desk, a guy named Mark, probably in his 30s, who seemed half asleep. No other guests around. He handed me an old-fashioned brass key, yeah, an actual key, not a card, smiled like he'd done it 1,000 times, and mumbled something about continental breakfast from 7 to 10. My room was on the 3rd floor, room 312. The elevator groaned the whole ride up, and when I stepped out, the hallway lights flickered, literally flickered. I laughed to myself. It was like every horror movie ever, and I wasn't even trying. My room was small but clean, with a view of the water if I leaned to the left of the window. That night, I went out for a walk along the beach path and grabbed dinner at this tiny diner where I was the only customer. I got back around 8 p.m., took a hot shower, and curled up with a book. No TV. Just me and the sound of the waves through the open window. I remember falling asleep early, like before 10, which is rare for me. Everything felt peaceful. The next morning, I went down for breakfast a little after 8. The dining area was just off the lobby, 4 tables, a weak coffee machine, and some toast with jam. A couple of older guests were already there, quietly eating. I made a plate and sat by the window. That's when it happened. A woman, maybe mid-50s, long gray-streaked hair, pale skin, deep lines on her face, walked up and asked if she could sit with me. I didn't see why not, so I smiled and said, "Sure." She sat down slowly, folded her hands, and just stared at me for a second. Then she said, "Good morning, Lily." My stomach dropped. That's my name, but I had never seen her before. I hadn't said my name to anyone since I checked in. I blinked and said, "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" She tilted her head slightly and smiled in this odd, almost sad way. "We spoke last night," she said softly, like she was reminding me of something simple. But we hadn't. I was in my room all night. No phone calls, no knocks on the door, nothing. I forced a little laugh and said, "No, I think you've got the wrong person." She didn't respond. She just kept that faint smile on her face and looked at me, eyes glassy, like she was seeing something behind me. I excused myself, tossed my plate, and went back up to my room, feeling a bit shaken but trying to laugh it off. Maybe she'd overheard my name from the front desk. Maybe she'd seen it on something. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I hadn't mentioned my name since check-in, and I hadn't interacted with anyone. I hadn't even used room service. And when I checked my room key, it just had the number, no name. Later that morning, I went downstairs and casually asked the front desk guy if names were ever displayed somewhere, or if guests could see any kind of list. He looked confused and said no. Everything was digital and private. Could someone see my name through the Wi-Fi or something? I asked, trying not to sound paranoid. He shook his head. No way. We don't even have public guest lists. I thanked him and wandered over to the little lobby, pretending to look at brochures, but the woman was gone. That afternoon, I walked around the town a bit, visited a used bookstore, and ended up at the cliffs that overlooked the ocean. It was quiet, empty. Just me and the sound of waves crashing far below. But even out there, I felt like someone was watching. When I got back to the hotel around 5, I stepped out of the elevator and saw her again. The woman from breakfast. She was standing at the far end of the hallway near the vending machine. Just standing there, still as a statue, her head bowed slightly, looking at something in her hands. I couldn't tell what it was. It looked like a photograph? I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared for a moment, heart pounding. Then I turned and walked quickly to my room, closed the door, and locked every lock. I even pushed a chair in front of the door. I don't know why. It just made me feel better. That night I stayed in. I didn't eat. I didn't read. I just sat on the bed with the lights on and tried not to freak myself out. I must have fallen asleep sometime around midnight. Then at exactly 3:17 a.m. I woke up. I didn't hear anything. I just woke up wide-eyed like something had pulled me out of sleep. The room was cold. Way colder than it had been earlier. I checked the window. Still shut. The heater was on low, humming gently. Nothing seemed out of place. Then I heard it. 3 soft knocks. Not on the door. In the closet I sat up, my whole body stiff. The closet was across from the bed, one of those old wooden doors with a loose handle. I stared at it, not breathing. Nothing. I got up slowly and tiptoed to the door. Pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then I opened it. Empty. Just my suitcase and a few hangers swaying gently, like they'd just been touched. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed up, waiting for the sun. The next morning I went down for breakfast late, almost 9:30. The dining area was mostly empty. I sat in the far corner watching the doorway. But she didn't show up. She wasn't in the lobby either. Part of me was relieved. Another part was weirdly disappointed, like I needed to know what was going on. After breakfast, I packed up and took one last walk along the beach. The fog was thick that day and I could barely see 10 feet ahead. But I stayed out anyway, letting the cold sea air clear my head. When I checked out, I asked again, "There's no way someone could see guest names? Not even through the Wi-Fi or booking system?" Mark looked confused. "No, I mean only staff has access and it's all password protected." I nodded, didn't say anything else, and left. I flew home that afternoon. Didn't tell anyone what happened. Not really. I mean, how do you explain that? About a month later, I got one of those automated feedback emails from the hotel. I filled it out and mentioned the woman briefly. Said I had an unusual experience and asked if they had a record of any guests staying in room 309. The one near mine, they never replied. To this day, I don't know how she knew my name. I don't know what she wanted. I don't know what would have happened if I'd opened the closet a few seconds later, or not at all. I've been to a lot of places since then, but I never use my full name when checking into hotels anymore, just in case, because sometimes someone's watching, and sometimes they already know your name. This happened back in 2017, when my cousin Lily and I took a short weekend trip to Asheville, North Carolina. We just needed to get away for a bit. No work, no stress, just a couple days to relax and reset. It was fall, and the leaves in the mountains were turning these wild shades of orange and red. The whole place looked like it was glowing. We found this cute little hotel called the Pine Grove Inn. It looked old on the outside, kind of like a big wooden cabin with stone pillars and these flickering lanterns by the entrance. Inside, though, it had been totally redone. The lobby had velvet chairs, a fireplace, even complimentary cider and cookies by the check-in desk. It was cozy, like something out of a Hallmark movie, if Hallmark movies included what happened next. We were in room 209, just down the hall from the elevator. It had 2 queen beds, a little balcony, and one of those giant mirrors on the wall across from the beds, the kind you always notice even if you're trying not to. Everything seemed fine at first. We dropped our bags, freshened up, and met some friends of Lily's for dinner. They were locals, super friendly, and took us to this pub up the hill. We had burgers, drinks, the usual. By the time we got back to the room, it was almost 1 a.m. Lily crashed right away. She's one of those people who can fall asleep in the middle of a sentence. Me, not so much. I watched TV for a bit, then turned off the lights and scrolled on my phone under the blanket like a teenager. Eventually, I must have dozed off. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up out of nowhere and I knew instantly something was wrong. The room wasn't dark anymore. There was a dim light coming from the hallway, shining through the crack in the door. That was weird because I remembered Lily locking it before we went to bed, and we definitely flipped the little bolt too. But the bolt was gone. Like someone had opened the door from the outside. I sat up slowly, thinking maybe a staff member had come in by mistake. Maybe the cleaning crew thought the room was empty. But then I looked toward the foot of the bed, and there he was, a man just standing there. Perfectly still. Not moving. Not saying a word. I froze. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I was falling through the mattress. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He wasn't holding anything. Just standing there in a red flannel shirt, jeans, and dark boots. His face was partially hidden in shadow, but I could tell he had scruffy hair and a short beard. His eyes looked blank, no emotion at all. Just staring. I couldn't even scream. My throat locked up. I thought maybe I was dreaming, but no. My heart was pounding, my skin was cold, and every single nerve in my body was telling me, this is real. Then finally, he spoke. I need to talk to Adam. His voice was low and hoarse, like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. There's no Adam here. He didn't move. Just stared a second longer. I need to talk to Adam, he said again, like a broken record. That's when I shouted. I didn't even plan it. It just burst out of me. Get out! You need to leave. Lily jerked awake, confused and groggy, until she saw the man too. She screamed. That seemed to shake him up. He turned around fast and ran out the door, slamming it behind him so hard the mirror rattled. We both sat there, frozen, breathing like we'd just run a marathon. The scariest part? The deadbolt had been unlocked. Neither of us touched it. We didn't even speak for a minute. Just stared at each other wide-eyed, trying to figure out what just happened. Lily got up and locked the bolt again, this time jamming the chair under the doorknob like you see in movies. I looked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. We called the front desk. No one answered, so we waited, fully dressed, lights on, sitting on the bed like scared little kids until it got closer to morning. Then we went down to the lobby together. There was a woman at the desk this time, and we told her what happened. She looked stunned. Said that nobody from the staff had been on our floor during the night. When we mentioned the name Adam, her face got pale. She hesitated, then leaned in a little and said, "We had a guest named Adam 2 weeks ago. He was in room 209. We asked what happened to him, but she just said he left early. Whatever that meant. We asked to see the security footage. The manager came out and told us the camera in our hallway had been acting up. He said it didn't catch anything between midnight and 4 a.m. Just a black screen. Convenient, right? They offered us a free night for the trouble, but we said no thanks and packed up to leave. We didn't feel safe there. We couldn't even sleep after that. Every time I blinked, I saw that man's face again. Blank, pale, and way too calm for someone who'd just walked into a stranger's hotel room. On the drive home, Lily and I kept trying to make sense of it. Maybe he was just confused. Maybe he really thought Adam was still in that room. Maybe it was just some weird mistake, but here's the thing. The guy didn't knock. He unlocked the door. How did he get a key? Why room 209? Why the name Adam? And the question that still haunts me the most. What if I hadn't woken up? What if he just stood there for hours watching us sleep? What if he hadn't been alone? Now every time I stay in a hotel, I check the bolt at least 3 times. I jam the chair under the knob. I make sure no one's lingering in the hallway before I go in. People think I'm paranoid, but they didn't see what I saw. Sometimes I still dream about it. Room 209. The red shirt, that voice. I need to talk to Adam, but there's no Adam here. There never was. Okay, so listen. This happened to me about 6 years ago, back in 2019. I was 32 at the time, living in a small town just outside of Denver. I was working as a training coordinator for a software company. Not exactly exciting, but it paid the bills. My cousin Ben, who's a few years older than me, had moved to Oregon a few years earlier. He owned this little auto shop in a town called Wyndham Falls. You probably haven't heard of it. It's tiny, like blink and you miss it kind of small. Anyway, we hadn't seen each other in a while. So when I had to attend a 3-day workshop in his area, I figured it was the perfect excuse to catch up. The company put me up in this weird old hotel on the edge of town called the Everest Inn. It was one of those boxy 2-story places with doors that open right out onto an outdoor walkway. Not fancy, but it looked decent enough online. I checked in on a Wednesday afternoon. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes everything look dull and a little bit eerie even if it's not supposed to be. The lady at the front desk barely looked up from her crossword as she slid me my key card and muttered something about breakfast being served from 6:30 to 9. Wow. I was in room 109, right at the far end of the ground floor. There were maybe 6 rooms on that side, all facing the same direction. Across from mine, near the back corner of the building, was this solid metal fire door. It had one of those push bars and no window, just a dented frame and a little sign that said emergency exit only. The first night was fine, boring really. I went to the workshop, grabbed some dinner at a diner down the street, came back and spent the rest of the evening watching reruns on TV and half-heartedly scrolling on my phone. It was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but I chalked it up to being in a small town. Now the second night, that's when things started getting weird. It was around 2 more in the morning. I was half asleep, one of those moments where you're drifting but still kind of aware of your surroundings. That's when I heard it. Clank, then a slow dragging creak, followed by a heavy thud. It was the fire door. I knew it instantly. The sound of metal scraping against metal. The echo that came after it shut, there was no mistaking it. I sat up, heart thumping. I waited, listening. Nothing else. Just silence. I thought maybe someone had gone out for a smoke or something, but that didn't make sense. There was a no exit sign clearly posted. And even if they had, wouldn't they come back in through the front? The fire door didn't have a handle on the outside. It was one of those doors that only opens from the inside. In the morning, I mentioned it casually to the front desk clerk, a different woman this time. She looked confused and said no one should be using that door at night. Only during emergencies, she said. Otherwise, it's supposed to stay shut and trigger a panel if opened. I asked if there were cameras near it. She shook her head. Only the lobby and parking lot have cameras. That back stairwell? Just for fires. Fine, whatever. But that night? It happened again. 4 a.m. Kriak. Thunk, same door. Same sounds, but this time I did something stupid. I got up and looked through the tiny peephole in my door, and I saw someone. A man. He was walking calmly, no rush, no panic. He had a black hoodie pulled over his head, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He passed right by my door and went into room 107, 2 doors down from mine. No big deal, right? Could have just been a guest, except I'd been paying attention that day. There was no car in the spot for 107, no lights, no sounds. It looked empty, and that door, the one he used? It doesn't have a handle on the outside. So how did he get in? By the 3rd day, I was freaked out, but also weirdly obsessed. I started watching the door. I noticed scuff marks around the bottom and black smudges near the handle, like someone had been using it more than once. Out of curiosity, I pushed it during the day. It swung open easily. Behind it was a narrow concrete stairwell. No windows, just bare walls and a metal handrail. I walked down slowly, heart pounding in my chest. At the bottom, there was another heavy door, this one opening into the back alley. There was no lock on the outside. That night, I didn't sleep. I left the lights off and sat in the chair by the window, waiting. Tono. The sound came again. Kriak. Thunk. I peeked through the peephole, and sure enough, The man in the black hoodie was back. Same slow walk, same routine. He passed my door and vanished into 107. This time I stepped out. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I crept into the hallway, sock-footed, barely breathing. The fire door was just swinging shut when I reached it. I let it click closed behind me and tiptoed down the stairs. At the bottom, I cracked the alley door open just a sliver. There was a car, old beat-up sedan, running, lights off. And someone was inside, sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat. They didn't see me, or if they did, they didn't react. I backed away slowly, climbed the stairs, and locked myself back in my room. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. In the morning, I went straight to the front desk and asked to speak with the manager. I told him everything, about the fire door, the man in the hoodie, the car in the alley. He didn't laugh or brush me off. He looked concerned, quiet. He asked what room the man went into. I said 107. He looked at the computer, then back at me. That room's been out of service for over a month, he said. Maintenance issues. No one's supposed to be in there. He called for a staff member and told me to wait in the lobby while they went to check it out. About 10 minutes later, they both came back. The manager asked me to follow him into the office. There's nothing in the room, he said. Dusty, no bedding. Power's off. We even had to use the master key. I asked if he could check the fire door's panel. He shook his head. It doesn't log individual movements, just alarms. And no alarms have gone off. He looked at me for a long second, then said he'd call the police and check the outdoor cameras. He offered to move me to a different room. I declined. I packed my stuff and left that morning. As I rolled my suitcase down the walkway, I glanced at the fire door one last time. A thick chain and padlock had been wrapped around the push bar. But the scuff marks? Still there. Like someone had dragged their feet through again and again. No one from the hotel ever contacted me. I never saw that car again. Or the man in the hoodie. But ever since then, I've had this rule. Never stay in a room near a fire exit. And if you ever hear one creak open in the middle of the night, don't look, just turn off the lights. Stay quiet, and whatever you do, don't open your door.